course, we know about the oil market, the fruit and vegetable market, the sugar market. What do they have in common? Buyers and sellers everywhere always look out for their own interests. The law of supply and demand controls these exchanges. The crime world is no exception to the rule. All trafficking has an economic reason to exist. A mafia, a criminal enterprise, is first and foremost a business with its own products to deliver and services to perform. The organized crime market generates around $870 billion a year. Where does this money come from? Trafficking in every form. The more illegal it is, the more profitable it is. So who are the main players in these underground markets? How are they organized? Who benefits from the illegal profits? This is what Dirty Dollars reveals. It's a journey behind the scenes of the criminal economy. Welcome to the extremely active cocaine market, the most luxurious narcotic in the world.
It's a very profitable and competitive business too.
So there's a different dynamic because of the fact that it's illicit, but a lot of the economic fundamentals are the same.
The worldwide demand of cocaine is about 900 tons per year.
Supply satisfies demand.
It's impossible to knock out these markets because once there's a demand, there's a supply. Once there's a supply, there's a demand. There's those fundamental economic realities of this.
It's a very profitable market. Juicy, but for the bad guys.
The cocaine market is estimated to bring in $90 billion a year. In truth, no one knows how much traffic there really is. The cocaine business is one of the most secretive branches of the criminal economy. A statement shared by Dr. John Collins of the prestigious London School of Economics. This researcher leads a group of analysts who is striving to decipher the way international cocaine trafficking has evolved over the last 30 years.
Black market. People don't keep financial records as clearly as in other industries, so we can guesstimate at it, but fundamentally it's based on a huge amount of assumptions.
The best way to lift the veil on this market, that's as secretive as it is active, is to consider it like any other business in the legal economy. Cocaine is a market. To commercialize it worldwide, you need manufacturing sites to handle production, exporters and transporters to handle the logistics all the way to the consumer market, and a sales force to develop the distribution network. All along the chain, teams of financiers and managers are responsible for maximizing profits. That's business, and the cocaine market is no exception to the rule. To show how it works, let's begin at the beginning, in Latin America, where production takes place. Cocaine is an alkaloid, a psychoactive substance that must be extracted from Erythroxylum coca leaves. This plant can only be found in 3 countries: Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru. Cocaine is a substance that must be manufactured, transformed from these leaves to obtain the white powder that's so dear to consumers' nostrils. It's exported in this form to consumer markets, except, of course, if it falls into the hands of the police. That's what happened to this shipment of 300 kilograms of practically pure cocaine. This cargo was intercepted in Lima in a run-of-the-mill cattle truck. The seized drug is being analyzed and registered by Commander Chilette and her team of forensic police. This is exclusive footage of one of the best seizures of 2017. It's also a great opportunity to know more about the cocaine itself.
Everything you see here, we weigh, one by one. We weigh them brick by brick to be sure of the weight indicated on the report. Once weighed, we take them to the experts, who will take samples and analyze them.
How does it go from a leaf to a powder? Well, that's the trick. It's a chemical process that begins in the jungle with the harvest. First, you have to extract the alkaloid. You have to allow the leaves to marinate in kerosene for several days. The mixture is filtered to obtain what is called Coca base paste. This Coca base paste must be transformed into the cocaine base. This step is called purification. It's pure chemistry. After several steps, you get the cocaine base. It looks like average pebbles when it's dry. This raw material will travel to more specialized labs far from the production zone. It's in these hidden labs that the chemists will carry out the third operation, called crystallization. This is a crucial step that will determine the product's quality. Finally, you get cocaine hydrochloride. This is the scientific name of Coke, or C, or the notorious cocaine. At the moment, it's almost pure. To summarize, 1 ton of coca leaves is needed to produce 4 kilograms of cocaine base paste. After crystallization, there are only 2 kilograms of pure cocaine left. The product is finished. Well, almost. There is still the step that's indispensable for every luxury product, the manufacturer's mark.
Do you see this? There's a cross, like the one in the Crusades. The logos are made with a press. It's to identify from which organization and location the drug comes, in order to inform the recipient. It means, this is my drug. It's pure and not cut with anything else. It identifies it. It says, I made it.
This has become an essential step since the end of the big cartels. Producers must stand out in order to be recognized by industry players. In the public's imagination, the white powder is associated with the Cali and Medellin cartels. And of course, the most famous drug trafficker in history, Pablo Escobar. But that was before. The golden age of the great Colombian drug cartels is over. Today, mafias have split into a multitude of hyper-specialized businesses that work together towards a single objective, developing their businesses and reaping the most profit. This is what Peru's Minister of the Interior has confirmed. Today's cocaine business is free enterprise heaven.
This kind of commerce is not organized like a normal business that controls production, transport, and the consumer market. We're up against a complex organization with different economic players at each step of its commercialization, for production, transportation, and selling on the market. These organizations function opportunistically.
Today, worldwide production of cocaine is estimated to be 1,350 tons a year. It's divided among 3 countries, Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru. Colombia remains the largest producer in the world, but the situation has changed over the last 30 years. Jaime Garcia Diaz is an international specialist in cocaine trafficking in the Andean region.
In the 90s, the biggest traffickers were Colombian. In the division of labor, Peru only provided the coca leaves.
Overall, it worked like that from about 1965 until the middle of the 90s.
Today, all of the drug production, the production of chemicals to make cocaine, and the drug trafficking financing is national. It's in the hands of family clans, of small Peruvian cartels.
The 300 kilograms seized by the police in Lima is the perfect example. The cocaine is 100% Peruvian. The drug went up in smoke in front of journalists and the country's authorities. This batch was worth around 300,000 euros when it came out of the makeshift lab. In Europe, it could have brought in up to 18 million euros. That's a 3,900% increase. To understand the reason behind this extraordinary price difference, you must go back to where it's made. So it's in Peru, in the Amazon rainforest, that we will look for answers. Let's head to the Alto Huayabamba Valley. 2 men have accepted to tell us about their daily lives as cocaleros at the beginning of the 90s. At that time, Hilmer and Osvaldo were small farmers, living off their crops. here in the heart of the rainforest. But 30 years ago, Colombian drug lords came to the area.
Here, the government had literally abandoned the farmers. We had to fend for ourselves. There were no farming subsidies. That's why so many went over to the illegal side.
We knew that it was illegal, but we didn't have other options. Corn and bananas are not profitable. It's not enough to survive on. We had no alternative. It seemed to us that coca was the only way to survive.
And so to really understand what the potential alternatives or development prospects for those areas are, you really need to get on the ground and see what it looks like. I'm sure you've come across this idea, why can't they just grow coffee? Why can't they just grow chocolate or cacao? And really, when you go to these areas, you see exactly why. It's a 2-hour drive on a dirt road to the end of that road, and then it's a 2-hour boat ride upriver because there are no roads. So the notion that these people are going to grow a crop which can compete with crops which are grown in more economically developed areas is just nonsensical. These people are rational economic actors. They're not profit grabbers, they're not innately criminal, anything like that. These are people who live in very difficult circumstances and grow the crop which can feed their family.
At the beginning, I was skeptical, but I didn't have a choice. If you had lived here, you would have had to do it.
So at the start, cocaine is a farm product. From their first harvest, farmers' incomes increased 100 times. Drug lords pay cash. In remote areas, no one could afford to miss out on such an opportunity.
In this area of the Alto Guayabamba, we all followed the same path. We all did the same thing.
Generally, drug traffickers pushed farmers to produce the coca base paste. It's much easier to transport than tons of leaves. So it has to be produced on site. The farmers who take the risk see their profits multiply.
We wanted to learn how to make cocaine. It became profitable for us. We handled the transformation of the harvest from our own fields. We produced the base paste, and that way we could find the best buyers.
The farmers who transform the coca into the base paste are called cocineros, or cooks. Because in order to create a good base paste, you need the right recipe, the right methods, and especially the right ingredients. And this requires chemicals. You need large quantities of around 40 chemicals to make cocaine. It's trafficking inside of trafficking. The problem is that these chemicals are used in traditional industry, so it's a real headache for authorities. General Hector Loyatza Arrieta heads Dirandro, Peru's anti-drug police.
The role of chemicals is fundamental because they are the raw materials used to make the drug. Only 2 to 3% are imported. To be clear, the chemicals come from Lima through legal merchant companies whose papers are in order. It's when they arrive in the production region that they become illegal. Legal merchandise becomes illegal.
Cocaine production requires a network of very specialized suppliers who are able to deliver tons of toxic chemicals to the heart of the jungle. But it's the black market. The cocaleros pay over market price for these products. It's an essential cost 4 times a year for each harvest to make the cocaine base paste.
Once the harvest was finished, it took around 5 to 6 days to make the base.
Today, it's quicker. Technological progress has reduced the manufacturing time considerably. And the cocineros, the cooks, have truly earned their name.
Microwaves are used to accelerate the drying process of the base paste. Normally, if it's done the natural way, the process takes around 3 to 4 days. With the ovens, they can do it in 1.
Once dry, the base paste is sold to the highest bidder. Buyers travel directly to producers. Supply and demand is the golden rule.
And when a buyer came, he would gesture towards us. You knew what he wanted. How many kilos do you have? You said a number. Okay, let's negotiate.
The cocaine base paste is ready. This merchandise must be transported far from the fields to the drug labs that turn it into cocaine. The easiest way is by air. In 2015, in the Vrame region in eastern Peru alone, anti-drug police dynamited 275 aerodromes. That gives you an idea of the extent of the drug traffickers' logistical organization. Air traffic is intense during export season. If the police arrive at that time, all of the harvest, all of the transformation work could be lost. Loading must be done as quickly as possible in order to avoid being caught.
We brought the drug, they brought the money. Everything happened very quickly, very quickly.
Amazing footage from the Peruvian police shows how quick the exchanges are. You can see how quickly the airplane finds the area. It lands. This signals the group of couriers to bring the drug to the airplane. The pilot pays for the merchandise, they load up the plane with the drugs, up to 300 kilograms per trip. No one verifies the money or the merchandise. With drug traffickers, trust is indispensable for the business to operate smoothly. The police come to arrest the cocaleros. The operation's results? The drug and the money are confiscated. The plane is destroyed. Drug traffickers lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, police enforcement is an additional cost, a financial risk that weighs on the cost of manufacturing. In light of this, authorities in producing countries have organized eradication campaigns directly in the fields. Their objective? Hit the trafficking economy at its source. This is what happened 20 years ago in the Alto Huayabamba Valley.
It was a terrible blow. It was nearly fatal. Thanks to it, the history of cacao began. But it took time, 5 years, maybe more, before we could make a living from cacao beans.
In reality, some experts question the efficacy of eradication campaigns.
You know, if you saw the price of coca double on the farms in Peru or Colombia, that would have virtually nil impact on what's happening in the streets of New York or Sydney. Those prices are determined by other factors which are around trade and commodity transit. So it's that the production is completely decoupled from these things. So even if you saw huge eradication in Colombia or Peru, which saw a price spike and saw farmers able to charge double what they'd been charging before, it doesn't have any impact.
Replacing coca with another crop that's just as profitable requires costly policies that only affect a small part of the population. Drug traffickers know this very well and take advantage of it. In Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia, a large number of ruthlessly exploited workers are just waiting for the opportunity to produce coca to escape poverty. North America consumes 41% of the cocaine available on the market. Europe, 29%. Cocaine is a niche market, like the luxury market. It's an attractive product for a relatively wealthy clientele. At least, that's what studies from the UNODC, the UN office in charge of collecting worldwide data on organized crime, have shown.
And we had 17 million people using cocaine at least once in the last year. The bulk of those are just recreational users who have just gone to a party and have taken a little bit of cocaine. But they account for only a small proportion of the actual consumption. So we have what we call a Pareto distribution, which is typically 20-80%, which means 20% of the users account for 80% of consumption.
Whatever the case, of 17 million consumers in the world, 12 million live in Europe and North America. This clientele is sought after by traffickers because of their buying power. How is the traffic organized to reach consumers who are far from the production areas? This is the job of the criminal groups responsible for transporting the cocaine, the exporters. The logistical organization of cocaine traffickers constantly adapts to avoid getting caught by anti-drug police. But because of geography, the routes are more or less the same. To reach the different consumer markets, cocaine first travels through transit countries like Ecuador, Venezuela, Brazil, and Mexico to reach the American market. Through Brazil, the Caribbean, South Africa, and Western Africa to reach the European market. Criminal organizations must stay off the radar of various anti-drug trafficking authorities. The simplest way is to take advantage of the increase in the volume of merchandise that's moving around the world each day. Sylvain Raymond is in charge of the anti-drug trafficking program at the WCO, the World Customs Organization.
Today, when you see the explosion that has occurred over the last 30 or 40 years and the globalization of trade, just in terms of putting merchandise in containers and the explosion of trade, you can imagine that the proportion linked to crime has exploded in the same way.
It's very complicated for us, specifically in port areas, and especially with the foreign trade increase we've had in the last few years. Generally, they do business with transport companies. They transfer the illegal substance to a collection center or a warehouse. From there, they simulate the export of a product, or they will simply place it in several containers, which means that they will hide a certain amount of the drug in a container that contains legal cargo.
In Peru, more than 43 million tons of merchandise transit through Lima's port every year. Peru's police only have a single scanner to check suspicious trucks. A lucky break for cocaine exporters, and the consequences are undeniable.
50% of the drugs that leave Peru travel by sea.
Cocaine travels mainly surrounded by legal merchandise. Around 500 million containers are handled each year in the world's different ports. That's 16 containers a second. For the agents at Interpol, it's become very difficult to monitor exporters' activities.
The biggest trend at the moment is what we call the rip-on, and this is where you have, before the traffickers used to conceal the drug inside a particular commodity product, okay? So you had bananas, you have pineapples, coffee, you name it. But now you don't need to do that. You don't need to conceal the cocaine between a big shipment. What people are doing, traffickers are doing, they basically take duffel bags, they put cocaine in it, and then the containers are open just when they're transiting a port. They throw the bag in, and then they close it, they replace the seals, and this is what they call the rip-off. And it basically the company that is shipping the commodity, they're not involved with the crime. When you do the seizure, you don't know exactly who is behind the seizure. You have no trace, and it's harder to investigate. This method, you guarantee that there is more anonymity. If you're caught, you're not going to be linked to anything, and then you can do another one next week. Instead of doing one shipment with 1 ton, you do several shipments with 200, 300 kilos. It's safer, it's easier, you don't get caught so easy.
It's a game of dominoes. What I mean is that as traffickers become more creative, we're always just a little bit behind. As soon as we discover one modus operandi, they've already started thinking about a second one. So we're constantly racing to outsmart each other.
Transporting cocaine is the heart of trafficking. Exporters show unlimited ingenuity to get the drug to the consumer markets. For example, to export from Colombia, mafia transport companies offer a practically undetectable and efficient means of moving the drug to the USA. Tiny submarines. These submarines can transport up to 8 tons of cocaine to Florida in one trip. The latest official figures estimate that 30% of the cocaine consumed in the USA arrives in submarines. Moving cocaine is also the job of small individual companies. A significant amount of cocaine crosses borders in the pockets or bags of normal individuals. They're called mules. The drug smugglers pay between $2,000 and $3,000 for this service. It's an attractive amount, as long as they make it through.
Tu libertad vale más.
More opportunistic, Mexican cartels sometimes use migrants to import the drug to the United States. Crossing the border illegally with the help of a smuggler costs around $2,000. It's a large sum for hopeful immigrants. But with the mafia, they can always work something out. That's what John Doe, a former member of the Tijuana cartel, explains.
There is another way. If the person does not have the amount and wants to cross and is able to do it, they are offered. I'm not going to say we. They are offered to cross illegal drugs, marijuana, cocaine, heroin. One load that they cross would be enough for their payment to cross.
Whatever it takes to supply the market, whatever the cost.
The authorities in charge of fighting trafficking, we act. We try to anticipate their moves, their logic, and the consequence of that is that there's an impact to the final price because the cost of customs seizures is included in the final price. We are a part of the traffic and this economic situation.
The further you have to travel to reach the end consumer, the higher the risk of falling into the hands of law enforcement. This factor justifies a huge increase in the price of cocaine. While a kilo of cocaine is worth 2,500 euros per kilo in the countries where it's produced, it costs between 35 and 40,000 in North America and up to 60,000 euros in Europe. You can see that it's the risk that influences the price. Because in this kind of business, there are only two possible options. It makes it through, or it doesn't. To avoid discovery, traffickers rely not only on hiding their products, they have also completely transformed the very structure of traditional trafficking. Today, in the age of globalization, people are working together and cooperating across borders.
It's harder to investigate if you don't have one main structure. You can only get part of it. If you're investigating a big structure, with these people making part of this big family, you can get even other parts of the groups. But if you have just one little group here, it's going to be isolated for the rest. The others will find another group that is going to be doing, this type of outsourced work, and then they will continue on doing the business. With the amount of criminals running around, this business basically has a guaranteed structure to continue.
Before it was really one group doing it. Now, the more and more you get various groups cooperating with each other. So this is a good example of this increasing international cooperation among ethnic groups.
So the cocaine market is now open to all mafias. 20 years ago, Coke was the Colombians. They bought land and companies in Western Africa to stock the cocaine and to create networks to transport it to Europe.
Today, you realize that in the space of 10 or 15 years, organized crime that's 100% African goes to Latin America to buy directly. They handle all of the logistics, the transport, storage, and sale on the European market. So you realize that nothing is set in stone.
Africa offers many advantages to cocaine traffickers. Mafias know perfectly well how to take advantage of the authorities' lack of resources and political instability.
I think that drug traffickers need gray zones, where there's a lack of security in order to cover their tracks. These gray zones that lack security interest traffickers. You can see it very well in areas like the Sahel, where there's a cluster of activity, where everything has gotten muddled. The link between organized crime and the threat of terrorism is becoming more and more obvious.
Here we are. The cocaine is going to enter consumer markets. In Europe, there are many ways for it to enter, but the risk is high for the exporters. The means available to the police, customs officials, and armies are far superior to those of their South American and African colleagues. The owners of this trawler know this all too well. Off the coast of Great Britain, they were chased by a warship. Helicopter, speedboats, a drone, an infrared camera. The smugglers never had a chance of escaping. The army, backed by experts at the National Crime Agency, intercepted and boarded the trawler in open water. 3.2 tons of cocaine were seized. Seizure is a kind of customs tax the traffickers pay, except that it represents 100% of their product's value. No matter, because another boat a little farther away was able to slip through the net. In Spain, the Netherlands, Albania, France, and Italy, tons of cocaine arrive safe and sound. Distributing it works like any legal business. Wholesalers sell the cocaine to semi-wholesalers who sell to retailers who then sell to consumers. Vladimir is a dealer. He sells around a kilo a year, mainly to finance his personal use. He explains how he gets his cocaine.
The first time you go up to Rotterdam, they show you the product. They prepare the product that you want for you. For 500 grams, you pay 13,000 euros. You have 2,000 euros in expenses. That makes 15,000. It costs 2,100 euros to move 500 grams. It's hidden in a truck that leaves from Holland, loaded to the hilt. It's not just for one customer. When you're in Holland, they tell you where the parking garage is. You pay half, and after 15 days, you send the other half with a guy who comes to get the money and takes it back.
Again, transport and exchange are high-risk operations. Customs officials and police are mobilized everywhere in Europe. It's a fact that in recent years, the number of cocaine seizures has increased. Nearly 50% of all the cocaine produced worldwide was seized in 2017. However, the street price of a gram hasn't gone up. Supply continues to satisfy demand. How? Again, it's like a traditional business. You just have to sell a product of inferior quality. In drug trafficking, it's called adulteration. To understand, let's analyze a gram of cocaine sold on the street. More than 50% of the powder is made up of levamisole, an antiparasitic drug used by veterinarians, in addition to a bit of acetaminophen, sugar, talc. In the end, only 25% of it is pure cocaine at best.
The adulteration process is almost like a tax. That it's not necessarily the profits from that adulteration go to any one place. It's just along the way, a bit more adulteration happens until it reaches street level and its purity is very heavily degraded.
This phenomenon is well known to consumers. Carl was addicted to cocaine for a long time. For nearly 10 years, he consumed up to 10 grams a week.
Having known people who went through a lot of it, and having become friends with them, sometimes they showed me how they cut the original product. And I discovered that what they bought wasn't completely pure either. They cut it, leaving less than 30% of the coke in the final product. They made a crazy profit. I completely understood why they did it.
Cutting the product ensures a reasonable profit margin from captive consumers. If you want a good product, you have to know the right network, and you have to be ready to pay. In Europe, a gram costs between 30 and 100 euros. It all depends on the distribution channel, just like in a traditional business. Products are cheaper in the supermarket than in high-end boutiques.
Contrary to what you might think, when you're a small entrepreneur in the drug trade, you have many constraints. You have to have cutters, you have to have dealers, you have to have lookouts. There's management in drug trafficking, and that costs a lot. And very often, you have to downgrade your product. The more you cut it, the more profit you make, and the more you can spread out your expenses. There's a small dealer logic that clearly impacts the quality of the product. And it's true that if you have clients who are a little sophisticated, they'll ask for a purer product and they'll pay more for it.
You know, I don't cut it. My price is higher. I'm more expensive than the others, but I sell a certain quality, like a fine food shop. I sell a gram uncut, but everyone comes back to me. I've had the same customers for almost 15 years. I've met everyone. I've sold to judges, doctors. So Coke really touches everyone. But it's very hidden, very discreet. And what they like about me in my high-end boutique is my discretion.
To sell the product, you need to discreetly access customers who may not want to deal directly with criminals in a sketchy area. Dealers found a way around that by using a sales force that can supply demand at its source.
Coke isn't really sold in neighborhoods. It's in bourgeois circles, in the liberal left, with musicians, the media, those who have the means and who have fun taking it. So those drug dealers usually have representatives. They're a little like traveling salesmen with a foot in each world. They've got a foot in the housing projects to find the product in large quantities and as unadulterated as possible. And so the drug dealer has the power to cut the product the way he wants. And he has social skills that a basic thug from the projects doesn't have. And that will basically allow him to approach high-end customers without frightening them.
There's another way to reach this skittish clientele, and it would have been surprising if drug dealers hadn't tried to take advantage of it. E-commerce. Neil Walsh is the head of cybercrime at UNODC.
It's pure magic, premium quality cocaine. It says it is, simply put, this uncut cocaine is the best on the dark net, hands down. Why do customers buy drugs from the internet and from a dark net forum? Do they feel that it's safer? Do they feel that it minimizes their risk instead of going down to a dark street corner, maybe increasing the likelihood of arrest, that they can do something online? But what is it? It's a photo. It's nothing more than a photo. So are you going to take the risk of giving $1,800 to someone that you don't know, in a location you don't know, and hope that that thing, that may or may not be what it says it is delivered to you?
I know a few people who've tried it, and it has rarely worked out very well in terms of quality.
That certainly explains why less than 1% of cocaine is sold on the web today. From the growing fields to consumers, the cocaine industry is characterized by a multitude of intermediaries. It has an army of dealers on many different levels. But what happens to the money from all these transactions? Who benefits from the crime? The drug trafficking economy garners huge profits, but it's also a business that requires large investments. In other terms, cocaine trafficking is lucrative, but there are substantial and inevitable costs that the mafia has to finance. What is true for the legal economy is even more so for the criminal economy. That's the opinion of Manuel Benavides, project manager for the International Monetary Fund.
Drug trafficking is essentially an economic activity. An illegal one, but an activity nonetheless. Drug trafficking is like a kind of parent company with branches. But because it's clandestine, you don't know where the boards meet. We know there are technicians, a staff that analyzes projections and then handles the problems they encounter in the areas they operate.
To solve its problems, mafias use techniques that we can easily compare to the business strategies of legal companies. Of course, they stray a bit from the concepts taught in business schools.
In the same way that legal industries use marketing, drug trafficking, with its own logic, has its own marketing. And what is this marketing? It's buying the goodwill of authorities and entrepreneurs who protect them. Spending money to buy the help of all of these people can only be called one thing: corruption.
If mafia-style marketing doesn't work well enough, there's always lobbying. It's common practice in traditional business for large groups to try to put pressure on politicians in order to convince them to vote laws to help their businesses. With dealers, the principle is the same. The only thing that changes is the method. Lobbying is the job of sicarios, or hitmen.
You have to recognize the reality of organized crime violence in Latin America. It's something Europeans can't fathom at all. Police are decapitated at the drop of a hat as a preventative measure. If you're good at drug trafficking, they'll murder your mother, or they'll cause your children to have an accident. The job of a customs agent or an anti-drug agent in Africa or Latin America is 1,000 times riskier than that of a European or American agent.
In Colombia, the price cartels pay to kill a police officer is around 650 euros. These expenses are included in the cost of every gram of cocaine that is sold. We now have all the necessary information to see why a kilo of cocaine that's purchased in Lima for 2,500 euros sells for 60,000 euros in Rotterdam. In Peru, the producer's price is 2,500 euros per kilo. It's pure, almost 100% cocaine hydrochloride. This kilo arrives in Europe. The wholesalers have already cut it. Now there are 2 kilograms of cocaine. It's now 50% pure with a total wholesale value of 60,000 euros. Retailers cut it again and again. Now there are 4 kilograms of cocaine. It's only 25% pure. Total value, 200,000 euros. If you analyze these figures, you can see that the price of a kilo has multiplied 24 times from the producer to the consumer. However, the price only increased 3 times between the wholesaler and the consumer.
Because what we do know is that you have a very skewed distribution. So very few people make a lot of money, and a lot of people make very little money. The explanation is at the retail level, you have many, many people involved in selling the drugs, and most of them make hardly any income. So there was some studies which showed actually the income is below the minimum wage income if you would earn a decent income.
So it's the people who manage to transit make most of the money off this, and the people growing it and actually the people selling it on the streets in the end consumer market make very little of the overall percentage of the profits.
The money is not where it's produced. Many think that the traffickers are there. But the money comes from the final destination.
So there is a sense of, and certainly there's a lot of frustration in producer countries and transit countries that while they're forced to crack down on the actual commodities, the financial centers in other parts of the world enable the trade through the transit of money.
Alexei Fichenko heads the worldwide anti-money laundering program for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime.
There are criminals, they really invent mechanisms to enjoy proceeds of crime, to enjoy all these wealth, but in the way that it will be not attributed to them, that governments cannot confiscate it.
On average, we can consider that around 50% of trafficking profits are laundered. The rest is used to pay the merchandise, the shipping, and expenses. A large part of the profits is spent on a day-to-day basis, especially by small dealers. There are many of them, but these amounts are too small to draw the attention of the authorities. When it comes to laundering millions of euros, mafias turn to what should be called financial crime.
The money laundering was really a direct part of the enterprise. Pablo Escobar had his money launderers who worked for him. They were part of the organization. They still exist, but it's far less nowadays. So we have far more specialists who just have nothing to do with drugs, but they're specialists in money laundering, and they offer their services.
We just started to collect information about them. What we see is really, I would say, looks very dangerous, because it's like kind of a parallel financial system, illegal ones. Imagine, there are, say, a real example, about 200 bank accounts. Every day, from each account, money are transferred to 3 or 4 another accounts every day. It's like a huge tumbler. Okay, Alexei, you want to transfer money, you want to hide 10 millions. This is the entry point. Send your money to this account, and then you will get your money back in several days, maybe in few payments, and to totally another accounts. Or I may not even get money to a bank account, but I will get just documents that now I'm a happy owner of cargo of some vessel somewhere in the, say, Indian Ocean. Metal tubes, or maybe rice, or maybe fertilizer, or some other commodity. And then immediately I get contact details of 2 companies who are willing to buy this cargo, and they will pay me money. So I just sign document, send fax, and now I'm a happy businessman who just made a great deal. I'm clean. And this money, they cannot be associated with the original, whatever was the original crime, because they went through this mixer. And it's almost impossible to trace it.
It's clear that mafias excel in the art of optimizing their profits at every level of the economic chain. They exploit all of the loopholes, the opportunities that the global economy offers them, both in business and finance. The ways of fighting drug trafficking are ever more efficient, but new markets are emerging, offering potentially huge profits for the narcotics industry.
I don't expect another massive decline in the United States cocaine market in the foreseeable future, neither in Europe. Maybe a mild decline, it's probably peaked. But Asia and the Middle East are probably going to be the new markets. And that's the fundamental truth of this, is that it shifts around. Just like production shifts around, so too does consumption.
The organizations fighting against drug trafficking are the main economic constraint on the cocaine market, and they have no choice but to continue tirelessly playing their roles.
Considering the logic of this traffic, we're not close to ending the fight against organized crime. Whatever the political and geopolitical evolution in the world concerning the production of these products, you realize that there is an enormous quantity of merchandise which generates an enormous amount of money. And perhaps that's the other key, money. Shouldn't we work on this point as much as we worked on logistics?
This is of how much of the money which is being made illegally, laundered, is being seized by the authorities. And as I told you before, now we have around 50% of the cocaine which is being seized by the authorities. So a dramatic amount. You know how much it is on the money side? Less than 1%. The best estimate was 0.2%.
Between the licit and the illicit, there are contact points. One of these contact points in the global economy are the tax havens. In my opinion, tax havens are big launderers. And who installs offices in tax havens? With that exception, there are offices and branches of financial institutions that manage the financial flow of the world's economy.
Such jurisdictions, such havens exist because there is demand. There are people who want really avoid taxes. There are criminals who want to hide their money. There are husbands who want to hide money from their wives before divorce. This is a segment of market. It's relatively small, but it is. And there are also companies who are just doing so-called, aggressive tax planning, tax minimization. They are just not happy with high taxes they are paying in their countries, and they are finding different ways to minimize their taxes. And if there is a tool, then everybody will use it, criminals and not criminals.
I don't believe you can ever win a fight against drug trafficking. I think we've learned that very well over the last few decades. When we talk about the failures of the war on drugs, that's what we mean. This idea of just more effort is required. We just need to get tougher on it, and that will eventually knock it out. It's nonsense. It's not going to work, ever. You're fighting against an economic force, an economic logic. It's self-defeating.
Lo más fácil sería
The simplest way would be to make an agreement to outlaw tax havens. So why don't we make such an agreement? Let's say that human nature is ambiguous, contradictory, even mysterious.
That's a very poetic way of saying that money doesn't stink, and that it's not only mafias who profit from the huge amount of money that cocaine trafficking generates. Legal or illegal, business is business.